Hello everybody. So the series finale of WandaVision dropped on Disney Plus yesterday, so today I'm going to give my thoughts on the entire series. Let's go. So if you don't know, the way I like to structure my reviews is I like to do a non-spoiler review where I give my general thoughts and I kind of recommend whether or not you, the viewer, should watch what I'm reviewing or not. And then I go into more details of just more like spoiler stuff. I'm just giving my more specific thoughts on the thing I'm reviewing. And then in the case of something like a series like this in the MCU and a larger thing, I give my predictions for what's going to happen next. So with that said, let's get into my non-spoiler review of WandaVision. And I think that this series is a really good addition to the MCU. I think that it's a good start to Phase 4. It sets up a lot of interesting ideas that I think are going to be explored further in Phase 4 in the future of the MCU. And I think that it's going to be very important moving forward. So I would say that if you are if you're very invested in the MCU, you've probably already seen WandaVision. But if you're a fan of the MCU and you've kind of been on the fence about watching WandaVision, you're kind of like, I don't know what this is, it's a sitcom, like what's happening? I would say this is definitely something that you're going to need to check out. It's going to be something that's going to be important moving forward in the next few years in the MCU. And I'll say that you are going to have to tolerate watching sitcoms. You're going to have to be able to stand watching sitcoms. If you're just like the kind of person that you're just like, oh my god, sitcoms are the worst thing in the world, you're going to have a hard time with a lot of this show. So I would recommend, if that's the case, if like the main reason why you haven't watched WandaVision yet is because you just really hate sitcoms, then I would say skip to the 4th episode. Just know that there were 3 episodes prior, because the 4th episode just kind of gives context for the first 3 episodes. So if you just watch that and just know that it's kind of referencing the first 3 episodes, then I think that you'll have a more enjoyable time watching it, because the first 3 episodes are just sitcoms. After the 4th episode, it gets kind of a mix of sitcom and real world stuff, so I think that that'll be a little bit easier for somebody who doesn't enjoy sitcoms to kind of be like, kind of wrap their head around, to kind of bear watching. So I think that if you just cannot stand sitcoms at all, then just skip to the 4th episode. If you're kind of just like, alright, sitcoms aren't really like my thing, but I can, I like watching them when I watch them, then I would say watch the first 3 episodes. I think that it sets up sort of the mystery of what's going on very well, where the 4th episode is kind of, it doesn't give you the complete answer, but it kind of gives a little bit more of an answer for it than you would have gotten, than you like get in the first 3 episodes. So I would say, if you are in the case where you just cannot stand sitcoms at all, then just skip to the 4th episode. That will just make it a lot easier for you. And then I just want to say that this series just does such a good job at showing how good of actors both Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany are. Like, just to be able to go through all these different sitcom genres, play these different types of characters, to transition so well between, sitcom acting to, like, kind of horror, thriller kind of stuff, especially in the first few episodes. It's like, that's kind of, like, that's crazy. That's so cool that, like, they're able to just, I think this show, it really showcases how good of actors Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen are, to be able to transition so well to all these different types of roles that they have to play throughout. So to conclude my non-spoiler review of WandaVision, it's definitely a very good start to the MCU. It's going to be very important moving forward, so if you haven't watched it yet, you definitely should before you know, before the next few shows and movies come out. This is going to be very important for the future of the MCU. So watch it, and again, if you just can't stand sitcoms, skip to 4th episode. So yeah, that concludes my non-spoiler review. So let's get into some spoilers. So the way I kind of want to do this spoiler review for this series is I want to go episode by episode. I've done a review for the first 2 episodes of WandaVision. You can watch that by clicking there. But to kind of, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more in the context now of, you know, having seen the entire thing, how my view of the first 2 episodes has changed since then, what things I've noticed, and then obviously for the rest of them, I haven't talked about anything since the first 3 episodes, so this will be just new thoughts for you of, you know, what are my thoughts on the episodes 3 through 9 of WandaVision. But to start off, episode 1, like I said in my review, and like all of the episodes after this of the entire series, this one really just does such a good job at just recreating that era, the era of sitcoms that they're trying to do. It really feels like it's a sitcom straight from the 1950s, and that's just what they did with every single sitcom they did throughout the entire series. Is every single one they did was spot on for the show and the era that they were, you know, recreating. So yeah, so they definitely do a good job in episode 1 of that. Now, one thing I've noticed now after seeing the entire thing in the first episode is I think that I see the dinner scene differently. I feel like at first I thought it was more of like Wanda was making Mr. Hart choke and Mrs. Hart was telling her to stop it, but that was on the outside. I thought it was like going on in her head, in Wanda's head, so obviously we find out that it's in an actual town of Westview, but at the time I thought it was inside of Wanda's head, and I thought that when Mrs. Hart was saying, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, I thought it was like somebody on the outside. It's kind of like when you're in a dream and you hear something coming from the outside world, but it like is in a new context, so it's in your dream. I thought that was kind of what was happening, but now I think what was happening is I think Agatha was taking over Mrs. Hart and Mr. Hart's minds, which is why they're asking so many questions about like, oh, how did they get there? When did they get married? And why don't they have children? I think that's the important one. Why don't they have children? Because I think that was Agatha's plan the whole time, was to get Wanda to have kids so that she could use her kids against her to, take her power. So I think that what was happening here was this was Agatha's first attempt at kind of putting that idea in Wanda's head. Oh, why don't you have children yet? You should have children by now. And it's like, that's why the next episode is the whole thing for the children. So I think that's what was going on there, and the reason it gets so weird after that is because it wasn't part of Wanda's script for that episode. That wasn't supposed to happen, which is why, Wanda didn't know how to answer the question, and it just got all weird after that. So that's my interpretation of that now, after having seen the entire series. And I also just want to say that having seen everything, rewatching this episode it's a little bit better of an experience watching it now than it was, a month ago when you first see the episode, and you're just you're too caught up with like, what's happening here? Why is it a sitcom? What's going on? Is this in her head? Is this real? What's happening? How is Vision alive? You have so many questions, and now, since we've got all those questions answered, we're like, okay, now I get it. Now I can just enjoy, what they're doing here. I can just appreciate, oh, they're doing, Dick Van Dyke, but with Wanda and Vision. So I think that's cool. I think it's cool how, a month's time has changed kind of my view of this. Like, I enjoyed it the first time I watched it, but I think I enjoyed it more now, just being able to, just enjoy it and not have all these questions. So now, let's move on to the second episode. So again, I don't really want to focus too much on giving my thoughts on this episode, since you could see my thoughts clicking the video. My full review of the first two episodes up there. So instead, I'm going to mention some stuff that, I notice now that I've seen the entire series that I didn't really pick up on a month ago. So one thing is, during the magic show, if you watch Agatha's or Agnes's reaction to it, it's kind of like a nervousness, kinda. Like, it's different than everybody else's, which I hadn't picked up on before. So, I think that, I don't know what, I'm not exactly sure what that actually was implying even now, but maybe it's like Salem Witch Trials PTSD or something, like, oh, she's using magic up there, she's gonna get burned at the stake or something, but I don't know. There's something, I kind of have a better idea of, like, seeing her getting nervous. I'm like, okay, because she knows that Wanda is a witch, so that's what's kind of going on here. So, that's something I noticed, that I hadn't noticed earlier. That's something that kind of, knowing that Agnes is Agatha Harkness, I kind of noticed something that I hadn't noticed before, so I just want to point that out. And then also, of course, since the second episode, we've gotten explanations for the beekeeper and the toy helicopter. They're both sent in from the outside world, which they never really explained what happened to the beekeeper, or to the sword agent that became the beekeeper. Like, was he just in there for the entire time? Did he go out? Was it not until the hex got destroyed that he was able to escape? I don't know. They never showed that, but I don't know. That's kind of weird. And then, of course, the For the Children chant throughout the entire episode makes a little bit more sense now. I mean, it makes sense even earlier in the series. Like, even if you're rewatching the second episode, even before the third episode comes out, it makes sense because she ends up being pregnant. So I think just it gives a little bit more meaning now, because we know how important the children are to the series moving forward. So so the For the Children chant in second episode, it has a new meaning now than it did when I saw the second episode a month ago. And that's really all I have to say about the second episode. So let's move on to the third episode, which now we're getting into stuff that I haven't talked about on the channel, because I only did the first two episode review, and then I didn't talk about WandaVision until now, so this is me making up for that. So, let's get into episode 3. This is our 70s Brady Bunch episode. We get some weird stuff with Herb in this, with him cutting through a wall, and with the whole, she came here because we're all, and then Agatha stops him. So that, of course, makes a little bit more sense now than it did, again, a month ago when it came out, because we know now that Agatha was kind of controlling him at that point, making him do that. And I think that was her first move in the Vision part of her plan. I think she had two parts to her plan. Part 1, get Wanda to have kids. Part 2, get Vision away from Wanda and the kids. So, obviously, Vision is Vision, and he could be a threat to her. So, to get Vision as far away as possible, so when she eventually confronts Wanda, he's not there to stop her. So, that's kind of her first move there, of getting Vision suspicious of Wanda, of getting like, something's up here, Wanda's not telling me something's going on, gotta look into this, Herb's acting weird, there's the weird thing at dinner, what's happening? So, that's kind of the first move here, is starting to get Vision suspicious of Wanda. Then, of course, the twins are born in this episode, which is important for the rest of the series, and we also get Monica, or Geraldine, gets thrown out of the Hex by Wanda after mentioning Ultron, killing Pietro, which is also the first mention of Pietro since Age of Ultron, which is really cool. Obviously, we've gotten more mentioning of Pietro since then in WandaVision, but that was cool that's the first mentioning of Pietro since he died in the Age of Ultron, which that's very cool. And that's everything I want to say about the third episode. So let's get into the fourth episode, our first of 2 exposition episodes. We get, out of the 9 episodes in this series, we get kind of 2 episodes that are exposition episodes of kind of showing you what's going on here. And so this is the first one of those. It starts out right in the middle of the blip. Monica, we find out she dusted at the end of Infinity War, and she's coming back together after getting blipped back to life by the Hulk. So we jump in right in the middle of the chaos that's going on in this hospital, of people popping up back to life all over the place. And we also find out that Monica is Monica Rambeau, Maria Rambeau's daughter from Captain Marvel. We also find out that Maria Rambeau has died in the 5-year span, so Monica missed her own mother's death. That's important for the rest of the series. We also get introduced to Hayward this episode, which we had no idea how big of a jerk he was going to be. Then Monica meets Jimmy Woo. He does the little card trick thing he learned from Scott Lang. And then she gets sucked into the hex and becomes Geraldine. Then we get a bit of a Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis from the Thor movies, teaming up, figuring out what's going on here, why is this a sitcom, what's happening, who are the people inside of the hex. And so this is kind of, the exposition episode, like I said, of seeing, the outside perspective of what we saw in the first 3 episodes. And then the episode ends with Monica revealing, as she puts it,
"It's Wanda. It's all Wanda."
Which is something that almost everybody thought immediately when that was said, that that's a bit too easy, that's not completely what's going on, which that is what's going on. There is a little bit more to it. There is the whole Agatha thing, but it is all Wanda. Wanda did create this. We do find that out, but it's funny to think back to that we were like, oh, that's obviously not the whole story, but it ends up pretty much being the whole story. So those are my thoughts on the 4th episode of WandaVision. It's very much an exposition episode, catching you up on what's actually going on as far as they want you to know. And I think that's a very good episode for, if you just can't stand watching sitcoms. This is a good one to kind of jump in and get the context without the confusion and having to sit through 3 episodes of sitcoms. Although, they are worth sitting through. So, I would say, give them a chance. If you can't, then just, skip to the 4th one. Anyway, moving on to the 5th episode, which is our first of the 3 episodes that are kind of this mix of outside and inside perspectives. So on the outside, we kind of get this plot line of Monica and Jimmy Woo and Darcy teaming up and trying to, figuring out what's actually going on, figuring out that Wanda is changing the matter that goes into, to fit her, the world that she's creating, the storyline, the era that she's creating. So, so we get that. We get them sending in a drone that is supposed to just, be surveillance of what's going on, or just, get an idea of what's happening on the inside. But of course, Hayward is a jerk. We find out that this episode of how much of a jerk he actually is. Well, maybe not how much of a jerk he actually is, but we start to see we start to see a little more, he's a jerk. So, Hayward, being the jerk he is, put a missile on the drone to try to take out Wanda. Of course, Wanda's Wanda. That doesn't work. She takes the drone outside of the hex and gets all of Hayward's men to aim at him. And that's kind of the storyline that's happening outside of the hex. So then, inside the hex, we get this plot line where the twins are aging up. They age up to 10 years old. And then we get another plot line where Vision is starting to suspect Wanda more and more. We get this moment where Agatha, we get the, famous, oh, should I take that from the top, weird moment there, which I think now, having seen the whole series, I kind of realized, I think that was Agatha purposefully doing that. I think that was her purposely purposefully, trying to make it seem like she stepped out of the sitcom world and is like to try to make Vision suspicious of Wanda. All part of her plan to get Vision to go to the outside of the Hex as far away as possible. Probably her plan was to have him get destroyed outside the Hex, but to get him as far away, not a threat anymore, so when she confronts Wanda, he's not a threat to her. So this is another piece of that. I think that's what's going on here, is she's purposefully making it seem like she's stepping out of this sitcom thing to make Vision suspicious. And it obviously works, because Vision takes Norm out of the mind control that Wanda has on him, and he reveals that Wanda is controlling everybody and that it's painful. The whole process is very painful to him and to everybody. So now Vision knows that Wanda is controlling everybody, and he confronts her, but they get interrupted, and we get our cameo of Evan Peters' Quicksilver, which at the moment I was like, at the moment the 5th episode came out, seeing it for the first time, I was like, oh my god, that is crazy. Since then, it's kind of a little bit less crazy, but I'll get to that later in the video. But yeah, so we get Evan Peters, Quicksilver in the MCU, kinda. And then, of course, the other big thing in this episode is Sparky dies, nay, is killed by Agatha. But moving on to episode 6, where we get our Halloween episode in February. So Evan Peters' Quicksilver plays a big part in this episode. We get to see a lot of him, and we start to kinda see that there's more going on with him. It's not as simple as just X-Men Quicksilver went through some portal and ended up in the MCU and then ended up in WandaVision. It's not as simple as that. It's something else. He's working for somebody. He's being mind controlled by somebody. Something weird's going on. And so we get to kind of see... We get to kind of see some more information about that. Kind of suspect that it's not as simple as we thought at the end of the 5th episode. We also get the twins revealed that they have superpowers. Billy has kind of Wanda's powers, kind of mind control, moving things with her mind kind of stuff. And Tommy has super speed. And then our other plot line this episode is Vision trying to leave the Hex. He's now, fully suspecting Wanda, and he's trying to figure out what's exactly going on. So he leaves the Hex to try to save, try to get help. But we find out he can't leave the Hex. He starts getting destroyed. He starts falling apart. Darcy tries to save him, but then gets handcuffed by a bad sword agent. Then Wanda expands the Hex, and in doing so, Darcy, along with a bunch of other sword agents, get sucked into the Hex. We also get kind of a cheap diversion with Agatha in this episode, where she seems very much like she's being controlled by Wanda. Vision even takes her out of it, and she's, acting like Norm did last episode. So it makes it seem a lot like that Agatha isn't, she's just part of that world. She's not something bigger, which you find out she is. We find out that she was pretending with Vision, which... it seems like a cheap move there. It seems like, really, you made that specifically to make us either throw us off her track or to make us think that she was pretending. Either way, I don't understand why they did that, but it's not the first thing in this series that I don't understand why they did. I'm looking at you, Evan Peters, Pietro. I'll get to you later, though. And then on the outside of the Hex, we get more of the Monica, Jimmy Woo, Darcy Lewis team trying to figure out what's going on, figuring out that Hayward isn't, the best guy, isn't doing what they thought he was doing. They find out that he's tracking Vision, and we start setting up that he's trying to bring Vision back to life. And we also get our first indication that Monica is getting powers. And then, with that said, let's get into episode 7. This is probably my favorite of the sitcom episodes, mostly because that it's based on The Office, which is the first one of these that have kind of really, that made me kind of feel nostalgic, that actually I, watch a lot. Like, most of the stuff that they were, most of the stuff that they had been recreating hadn't been things that I watched. So, I've never watched Dick Van Dyke. I've never watched Bewitched. I've never really watched The Brady Bunch. I've never watched Malcolm in the Middle. So it's like, until this point, I hadn't really, I can understand that it's, what they were referencing of, how it was referencing the show, how it was referencing that era of sitcoms. But it wasn't really until this one that I was really able to be like, okay, I see exactly what they're doing here. So yeah, this was definitely the most fun episode for me to watch, because it's, again, based on The Office. I love the intro of it, of just being so much like The Office. I really enjoy this one. We get, a Vision doing a Jim Halpert look into the camera kind of thing. So yeah, that's hilarious. And speaking of Vision, we'll start with his storyline with Darcy, them teaming up, trying to get back to the house to, confront Wanda. And they keep running into blockades, keep running into red lights and construction workers and crossing guards and stuff. So that was kind of a funny bit there. And we're supposed to think at that point that it's Wanda doing this, but I think after seeing the end of this episode and what happens in the last two episodes, I think it's safe to assume, they never say this, but I think it's safe to assume it was actually Agatha doing this, because, again, it's part of her plan to keep Vision as far away as possible as she confronts Wanda. So, again, Vision could take her out easily. So, that's kind of a precautionary measure there. We also get this plot line where Monica goes back into the Hex and gets superpowers. Really epic moment there. Then she goes, confronts Wanda, and you get to this point where Wanda is kind of starting to listen to her. She's kind of, realizing what she's doing is wrong, and maybe she's gonna take down the Hex. But then Agnes walks in and takes Wanda to the side, takes her into her house, where we get the Agatha Harkness reveal and the catchiest song ever. I mean, let's be real here. Every good villain is a villain with a catchy theme song. I mean, why do you think Dr. Doofenshmirtz is such a great villain? Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated! Also, we get our very first post-credit scene of the series, where we find out Pietro's still alive after getting blasted by Wanda last episode. And then that brings us to episode 8, our second of the 2 exposition episodes in this series. And in this, we really get a good insight into Wanda's backstory and kind of how this whole thing got started. We see how her parents die, and we see why sitcoms. Why is this whole world based on sitcoms? And it's because through every single thing that's gone wrong through her life, sitcoms has always been her coping mechanism. So that's why she loses Vision, and the first thing she does when she has to create her new world with Vision in it, her immediate thing is Dick Van Dyke. So I think that that's cool that we both get to see the backstory of Wanda, how her parents die, and we also get to see why sitcoms. So we see her parents' death, we see the Stark bomb come in, and then we get to see how Wanda got her powers amplified by the Mind Stone. Not given to her by the Mind Stone, amplified. Because we find out that she's always been a witch. She's always had powers. She even used the powers on the Stark bomb to make it not go off. She used her probability hex. But the Mind Stone, which you previously thought gave her powers, actually amplified them to make her the Scarlet Witch, which is the name she's given at the end of this episode, which that was amazing, because they haven't been able to say that previously in the MCU, because they didn't have the rights to that name. I think that was with Fox owned that with the X-Men, but Disney bought Fox, and now they have the rights to officially say Scarlet Witch. And that's cool. We finally get that name. We even have a joke earlier in the 5th episode where Hayward is asking Jimmy Woo if she has a funny nickname, and Jimmy Woo was like, nope, not a one.
Does Maximoff have an alias? No, sir.
No funny nickname?
Not a one.
Then we get this really great moment between Vision and Wanda after Age of Ultron, where Vision is comforting her and says this most amazing line ever, one of Vision's best lines.
But what is grief? If not love, persevering.
Come on. Come on. Is that not gold? Ugh, so good. Then we get to see Wanda going to Sword headquarters, I guess, right after Tony's funeral to get the Vision's body to bury him. And, obviously, Hayward, being the jerk he is, doesn't let her, and even is like, he kind of puts in her head, hey, why don't you bring him back to life? You can do that, right? And she's like, I can't do that. It's like, but bring him back to life. Okay, it's not what actually happens, but that's basically what happens, isn't it? And we also find out, of course, Hayward's a jerk, so he was lying about Wanda stealing the Vision's body. He still has it, We see Wanda leave Sword headquarters without Vision's body. So, find out that was a lie, which comes back in the post-credit scene of that episode. We'll get to that in a second. Then we see Wanda go to Westview and go to the house that Vision was apparently having built for them to grow old in. Can I just talk about for a second how crazy that is, that, that was happening. Prior to Infinity War, that was the plan. They were going to build a house and live in the house in Westview and just live their normal lives and just... And then Thanos had to ruin it all. If we didn't hate Thanos enough, then she kind of goes berserk and creates this whole sitcom world and creates this new Vision in the Hex, in the sitcom world. And so we find out that's how it all started. Bit anticlimactic from where, we had theorized. We kind of had some, high levels of fan theories where, like Mephisto, all this crazy stuff. No, it's just simply Wanda just exploded and with all her powers and created this whole thing. So, bit of an anticlimactic explanation, but at the same time, it's still a pretty epic explanation. And then we get the Scarlet Witch name drop. Finally, Scarlet Witch has been said in the MCU, and the episode ends. But we do get a post-credit scene where we see White Vision, Vision's body that Hayward had. He uses the power that's still on the drone from the 5th episode to bring Vision to life, bring White Vision to life, and that's where this episode ends us. And now to get into the finale. I'm gonna give my thoughts in kind of ascending order of my importance and my excitement about them. So starting off, we get our answer about Pietro. So we find out that he's actually some guy named Ralph Bohner. And I guess that's who Agatha was referencing as Ralph, her husband, the whole time, was this guy, which, that's a bit anticlimactic. I mean, it just seems like to have Evan Peters as Quicksilver, they know what that means. They knew that we were gonna kind of speculate that that is X-Men Quicksilver, that's what we would think, and it's just some random guy Agatha found and mind controlled. I mean, I understand why they did it. You needed to have somebody who we would recognize as Quicksilver, and I assume they couldn't get Aaron Taylor Johnson, so if you can't get him, who's the next best thing for this? Evan Peters. He's somebody who we can be like, oh, that's Quicksilver, so, he's somebody who we'd recognize as him, so I guess that's kind of why they had to do that. I understand that. It just seems like we know we're going to multiverse. We know Multiverse of Madness. That's the title of Doctor Strange 2. Multiverse of Madness. We know multiverse is coming. So it just seems like to have something that seems to so much go towards multiverse and just have it be just a throwaway thing. Just, oh yeah, he's just some random dude, and we just had Evan Peters because we needed the fans to realize, to, kind of equate somebody with being Quicksilver, so we couldn't get Aaron Taylor Johnson, so let's get Evan Peters. It just seems like, if you're gonna have Evan Peters, they should have found a way to have it reference the multiverse. Now, they still could, I guess. They could make it be that the whole Ralph Bohner thing, that was his character in the Hex, and maybe we'll find out, oh, it actually is Peter Maximoff from the X-Men universe, but that just seems like you're rewriting something because fans, I don't know. I mean, that would be cool, but at the same time, it would just feel like, alright, now you just rewrote that because we all wanted you to, so, I don't know. I'm torn on this because it's like, I know why they had to do it, but it's like, why couldn't they have done and, like, went a different route with it? Went the route that we all thought they were going, so. That's kind of where I think our fan theory brains kind of went too high, which I'm glad that they kind of confirmed some stuff wasn't happening this finale before it came out. Like, we were all, like, the big cameo Paul Bettany was talking about, they confirmed before the episode came out that it was just White Vision. That was kind of the joke there of them having chemistry, just another version of him. So I think that kind of let this episode not feel disappointing, knowing that, we're not getting Magneto or Professor X or Wolverine or whatever we were thinking. John Krasinski, Reed Richards. Like, I think it's good that they confirmed the cameo is indeed White Vision, so we weren't gonna be expecting something to happen. I'm still a bit bummed we didn't get Doctor Strange, but I guess that'll be for Multiverse of Madness. Next, I want to mention Darcy taking out Hayward with the ice cream truck from the circus. That was very cool. Monica using her new superpowers to stop the bullets from hitting the twins. That was very cool. Also, the twins using their powers to take out the sword agents. Also very cool. And then Vision versus Vision. Such an epic battle there. I think that was such a cool thing they did there to have them fight, seeing just, it's kind of takes the whole, cliche of the Marvel movies of having a superhero fight a villain with the exact same power set. This one takes that to a new level. Having a character fight the exact evil version of themselves. So, that was an epic battle, and then we get to a point where they stop and they start talking, and White Vision is like, oh, I'm a body without the Mind Stone, and Vision is like, well, I'm a Mind Stone without the body, so you're starting to think, this is kind of setting up them merging, which didn't actually happen, but I feel like that's what they were trying to set up, but then they never actually did that. Instead, they had Vision restore all of White Vision's memories. So, not sure what's happening with that, because he flew away afterwards, so I'm interested to see where they're going with that. I don't know, is he gonna find Wanda, and they're gonna end up together? Does Wanda even know? I guess Wanda doesn't even really know what happened with Vision and White Vision. She doesn't know that Vision restored his memories, so I don't know, are they gonna end up together, or is it like, since White Vision, I guess, doesn't have emotions, that's not going to work? I'm interested to see where they go with this. They kind of left it a bit open-ended there. And then, the big one, Wanda versus Agatha. The two witches colliding. We get this moment where Wanda casts these runes that Agatha had taught her. We get the classic hero using the knowledge the villain gave them against them. So that's a cool moment where we realize, oh, Wanda cast the runes on the hex, on the walls of the hex, so that she can only use her powers. And then she, I guess, traps Agatha in the hex as the nosy neighbor. I'm convinced we're gonna see her again, because we get this exchange of, like, where Agatha says, you're gonna need me, and Wanda says, I'll know where to find you. So I think that's kind of implying that eventually, somewhere down the line, we're going to get the return of Agatha, and maybe that'll happen in Multiverse of Madness. Who knows? But that'll happen, I assume, at some point. And then we also get Scarlet Witch. Wanda gets her comic accurate costume, which looks so good, by the way. Like, I think that the MCU does such a good job at adapting these kind of campy comic book costumes. Like, they accurately adapt them to movies, but they make just little changes to them to make them look a little bit more practical and a lot more epic. Like, that's just so cool. They always find a way to do that where, they kind of please the comic book fans, but also make a suit that makes sense for somebody to actually fight in and actually looks epic. So that's very cool. Very happy to see that. And then Wanda destroys the Hex. And we get the goodbye between Wanda and Vision. This beautiful goodbye. I think they did that so perfectly. Their goodbye. I think that was very well done. I think that was a very satisfying way, because I was kind of getting worried of, like, I kind of knew something like this was going to happen where, she's going to have to destroy the Hex, and in doing so, Vision and I guess the twins get destroyed, and I think they did a good job at having that happen in a way that, wasn't weird to see, wasn't kind of morbid or something. Like, I think they did a good way of doing it to where, I think because they didn't show the twins disappearing, which I'm not sure if that means they're still alive. Kinda iffy especially with the post-credit scene. A little iffy on that one, but I think that they did a good job with Vision disappearing and their goodbye. They got the emotions right with that one, to make it really seem satisfying, and it was a good ending. And then Wanda leaves the Hex. All of the Westview residents are mad at her now for, mind controlling them for about a week. So she leaves Westview and the show ends, but we get 2 post-credit scenes here. So if you haven't seen the post-credit scenes, go watch them now. But we get 2 post-credit scenes. We get one where Monica gets recruited by a Skrull. I also assume that maybe is she the aerospace engineer that they were talking about? Probably, or another Skrull is, or something like that, because that would explain the significance of the aerospace engineer thing, which I don't really understand. I don't get how we didn't think of that. Like, honestly, I don't get how we were like, oh, it's gonna be John Krasinski as Reed Richards. Like, of course, like, that's just so ridiculous. Of course, the Skrull. That obviously makes so much more sense, because we know that there's Skrulls on the space station, because we saw that at the end of Far From Home. So that makes a lot more sense. And I assume that this is kind of setting up Captain Marvel too. Then we get the second post-credit scene where Wanda is living in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and she's using an astral projection to study Agatha's book, and she hears Tommy and Billy screaming for help. Billy and Tommy, I guess, are alive somewhere in another universe. Maybe that's the plot of Multiverse of Madness. I'm gonna get into predictions, so that'll be part of my predictions. But before I get into that, I also just want to say, why can't she just create a hex around her cabin in the middle of nowhere and just live her life with Vision and Tommy and Billy? Like, she doesn't have to mind control anybody, and she gets to still live her perfect life with her family. What's the deal with that? I mean, I guess they wouldn't be able to leave the house, but, like, she could just kind of just make it go around them as they go. I don't know. It seems like there's a solution here. I don't know. It seems like she could just put a hex around her cabin and do that. I don't know. But anyway, let's get into my predictions for where I think the future of the MCU is going after WandaVision. So we obviously know that Wanda is going to show up, in Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. So I'm starting to kind of have some ideas of what the plot of that might be. So I think the plot's going to be Wanda needs to seek help from Doctor Strange to search the multiverse for a universe where Billy, Tommy, and Vision are alive. I think when she made the Hex, I think she created a universe in a multiverse. So I think she's gonna have to go through the multiverse to find where they're still alive, and I assume that Agatha's still alive in that universe too. So I think that's where Multiverse of Madness is going, and I think that we'll get a little bit more of an idea in Spider-Man No Way Home if they do go with the Spider-Verse multiverse route, as the rumors are saying. So if they do indeed do some Spider-Verse stuff, we know Doctor Strange is in it, so I'm assuming that will fit into give us more of an idea of where Doctor Strange fits in with this, where Wanda fits in with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and it's going to give us more of an idea of what Doctor Strange in the Multiverse is going to be. And so I'm very excited for it. Also, White Vision, I assume he'll be back at some point. Maybe he and Wanda are going to get together. Maybe the problem is going to be, like I said earlier, he's emotionless, so that's not going to work out. I'm interested to see where they go with this. They set up a lot of interesting plot lines to move forward, like Monica having powers now. Very exciting stuff. And yeah, I just think WandaVision, an amazing start to Phase 4. I really have enjoyed this, and I'm very excited for where Phase 4 is going to go. And next in Phase 4, in 2 weeks, we get Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I'm excited about. And I think for Falcon and Winter Soldier, I'm going to do weekly reviews. I think my mistake for The Mandalorian and WandaVision is that I didn't do weekly reviews, which is why this video I'm kind of catching up with, giving my thoughts on 3 through 9 of WandaVision. So yeah, I think Falcon, Winter Soldier, and Loki, and a lot of the Disney Plus shows moving forward, I'll do weekly reviews for the shows. So anyway, that's my plan for Falcon, Winter Soldier the next few weeks in my videos. So please comment below your thoughts on WandaVision, especially the finale, and remember to like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos, and with that said, that's a wrap.